speak now to Big Phil, Philip Ingram, former senior military intelligence officer, and get his geopolitics roundup of the year. Hiya, Philip.
Hi, Alex. I've had to get out of bed to come and talk to you. It's terrible.
I bet that's not even a lie, is it?
No comment.
Yeah, you see. So why have you only got 4 on your list here? Have you got 5 for us, or is 4 the sort of number because it's 2024?
Oh well, no. I have 5 on my list.
Oh,
I'm fairly certain I had 5 on my list. Yes, I definitely had 5 on my list.
All right. Well, Alicia, you've missed number 5 then. That's Alicia's fault. She just came in. She was so happy during the advert break because we were singing her praises, and she came in and went, oh, can you do that again, please? No, you're rubbish. Right, let's go for it. Philip,
She's brilliant at bringing the tea in.
She is brilliant. She's very good at tea making. In fact, no, that's James Oxford, as I call him, who's on tea duties today, amongst other things. Let's go for the big geopolitics events of 2024. What is coming in at number 5?
Well, number 5. Which way do you want me to start?
Oh, well, I don't know. It's your list. You get to decide how you want it. You can start at number 3 if you like and work around.
2024 was the year of elections, and that's one of the biggest things. There's over 60 major elections across the world. You're starting off the beginning of the year with Vladimir Putin. Of course, it was a very close-run thing, him being re-elected as president of Russia, and you're ending up at the end of the year with Donald Trump being voted back into the White House. And we thought that was going to be the end of it, but we've got 2 major elections coming up in 2025 with the collapse of the German government and the French government in real trouble because they have to wait another 7 or 8 months before legally they're allowed to have another election. And the big thing about elections is it creates an opportunity for the disinformation campaigns that we see out of those states that pre-decide their elections before they hold them, those disinformation campaigns to create disruption across the world. And 2024 was that year of disruption where internal politics affected geopolitical decision-making, especially when it came to the United States and Ukraine.
It's a good one. It was very election-y in 2024. Unfortunately for us as well, it was election-y. OK, give me your next one, Big Phil.
Well, next one has to be, I mentioned Ukraine, it has to be Putin versus the world. And if you'd asked me in 2023 with what Putin had done in Ukraine and what my influences were, it was Putin versus the world was the only one. But, his operation in Ukraine, his special military operation, as he likes to try and call it, is, no matter what the commentators are saying, is hitting the stops. The Russians are making tactical gains in the east of Ukraine, but you don't win this sort of war through tactical gains. We have to remember, and I've said this a number of times, the Americans won every tactical operation that they fought in the Vietnam War. They didn't win the conflict. And this is where the Ukrainians pulled a masterpiece out this year with their incursion into Kursk, taking the fight into Russia, taking the fight to the Russian people, where they became more aware of what was going on. And they continue with special operations executive type activities across Russia. Only last night, a railway locomotive just outside Moscow, the engine caught fire and was burning. Russian railway systems are being disrupted by special operations executive operatives blowing up railway lines and control boxes and various other things. We're seeing drone attacks against Russian economic infrastructure, in particular their oil refineries and everything else, and attacking Russian military targets across Russia, thousands of kilometers away from Ukraine. And it's at that operational level it'll set the conditions for a strategic discussion that will bring the conflict to an end. But I don't think that's going to happen necessarily through 2025.
Ah, well, interesting. I was going to ask you that question. You've answered it in advance. OK, what is the next one on the list?
Well, the next one is effectively the Middle East, or Israel in the Middle East. We had, Israel's operation into Gaza after the horrific attacks on 7th of October. And what Israel has been doing is has been forced to expand its operation into southern Lebanon to deal with the Iranian threat, to deal with the threat coming from the Houthis. and now into Syria. So the Middle East, instead of becoming more stable with what's going on and being focused on one little bit, the Israel-Gaza war, as Netanyahu refers to it as, it's now becoming much more regional, and the potential for instability remains. The big thing at the moment is the HTS group pushing Bashar al-Assad out of Syria. That reducing Russia's influence in Syria, and therefore potentially Russia's influence across the whole of the Middle East, has got large geopolitical implications. But any grouping, no matter what they promise overtly when taking over a country like Syria, what actually happens in the end might be something completely different, as we saw in Afghanistan with the Taliban, who said, "Oh, don't worry, we've changed. We're going to be nice people now." Well, they're more hardline than they were beforehand, and of course, Libya hasn't settled down since then. So the Middle East through 2025 is another area of, I would describe as, increasing instability rather than becoming more stable.
And that brings us on to number 4 on the list?
Well, number 4 is Southeast Asia and China, and with China, we're seeing Chinese hacking activities going on around the world. We're seeing Chinese ships breaking internet cables and other cables in the Baltic and elsewhere. But we're also seeing China increasing its activity around Taiwan and practicing blockading Taiwan and practicing invasion maneuvers for Taiwan. But it's also carrying out other operations where it's trying to bully the Philippines off some of the islands that the Philippines owns in the Paracel and Spratly Islands, stopping the Philippines from reinforcing and taking food and supplies into some of their islands. And the Chinese Coast Guard are doing that quite forcefully, using water cannon from their ships. China is growing its national geography by creating artificial islands, which then means that they've got a 12-mile nautical limit around it that they physically own. They've then got a 200-mile economic zone around them across the Paracel and Spratly Islands as they try to gain control over the South and East China Seas. And that is creating an awful lot of instability in there. At the same time, China is increasing its Belt and Road initiative. It's effectively bought the whole of Africa. It's bought most of the stands, the Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan and elsewhere, and is now moving heavily into South America and working that quite hard. But at the same time, it's building its military up. It's professionalizing its military. It's just brought out 2 new stealth and they put out a 6th generation fighter and bomber aircraft, and they're building the equivalent of the Royal Navy in numbers of ships and power projection ships, so aircraft carriers and assault ships. They're building the equivalent of the Royal Navy every 12 months or so. So China is expanding dramatically, and it is probably the single biggest long-term threat from a world geopolitical issue. And of course, we've got China, Russia, North Korea and Iran all forming this axis of evil that we're watching.
And does number 5 bring us to anywhere positive?
Well, we don't know. It's Donald Trump, and we can't talk geopolitics unless we talk the uncertainty that the Trump election has brought into people's lexicons, because it will affect defense budgets. He will bully Europe. He will bully the EU. He will bully other countries around the world, because from a geopolitical perspective, world leaders don't like is unpredictability. And the one thing that you get from Donald Trump all of the time, even if you're in his inner circle, is unpredictability. And that's what has been on the lips of most of our global leaders and leaders of different groups, ever since the run-up to the US election and post-election. And we're seeing an awful lot of leaders going off to Mar-a-Lago, and I'm sure they're not playing golf with Donald Trump. They're sitting there trying to massage the way he's going to treat them in the future. And we're hearing of trade tariffs. We're hearing of what he might do in Ukraine or might not do in Ukraine. Of course, Vladimir Putin has responded in the only way a good old Russian spy would do, by getting as many naked pictures of Melania Trump as he possibly can and broadcasting them all over Russian national television.
Is that right? I missed that story.
Oh no, he did that. That was after a phone call that supposedly happened between Trump and Putin. That Putin's team said never happened. But the day after that phone call that the Russians deny ever happened, Russian national television broadcast naked pictures of Melania Trump for a period of time all over at peak times in the early evening.
Well, to be honest, she's a very attractive lady, so you know,
and that was her job for a while. That was her job for a while, taking her clothes off to get photographs taken.
I didn't know that. I like Melania Trump. I think she's quite solid. Anyway, thank you, Philip Ingram. I think that 2024 is a very geopolitical year, actually. People started saying the word geopolitics.